What's going on, boys and girls? It's your boy Zach here. There's no coffee in here. I just have the mug. It's just like an empty mug. There's nothing. What would you do if there was like? Okay, we're gonna be talking about utilizing a gimbal and my 5 favorite ways to use it. I've been traveling using mine for basically every single shot. I know you're like, Zach, that's crazy. You can't use just one piece of gear for all of your footage. Well, I'm gonna talk about it, and I'm gonna talk about how it can become useful in your projects, when and when not to use it, and my 5 favorite ways to make dynamic gimbal shots. Okay, so obviously you guys have probably heard of gimbals. They're like the biggest, hottest rage right now. And one thing is, do you buy one, should you not? Well, I'm gonna say right off the bat, you should totally have one part of your toolkit. And the reason why is because unlike a lot of other pieces of gear, like the latest 6K camera or the brand new drones that are coming out, I think a gimbal is really great because you can use it for multiple purposes. So for me, I like to utilize my gimbal for 5 different ways. The first one would be like doing a Steadicam shot. And that's kind of probably the most obvious one, is following a subject around and just doing tracking shots. Using the gimbal is basically like your Steadicam. And so one thing to keep in mind for doing those kinds of shots is you always want to have a subject in frame when following around your character. If you do like a Steadicam gimbal movement and it's just something on its own, what you're gonna get is excessive bobbing. And that's why a gimbal is much cheaper and much more consumer level than, let's say, a full Steadicam system, because a Steadicam system kind of gets rid of that bobbing up and down that you see when you utilize a gimbal or any sort of stabilizer on a lower end. It's because your arms just naturally bob up and down, and it takes away from that smooth stillness. And that's why it doesn't look as good. For me, I hate the like bobbing up and down look, but what can avoid and what can get rid of that a lot easier is if you have a subject in the center of your frame, because then your audience isn't focusing on the edges, they're focusing on what's in the middle and who's talking. So I use it for basically like lots of walk and talks, tracking shots. Outside of that, I don't really do that quite often because of the excessive bobbing and lack of natural feel. The second one, and this is another easy one, is just using your gimbal as a tripod system. So when you're doing a like travel gigs documentary or just doing something really run and gun, it's hard to access a tripod, pull it out, get the legs out. But with the gimbal, if you keep your body nice and still, you're able to get some very still shots, doing your pans and tilts just using your body. And what the gimbal will do is actually do a nice, smooth left to right movement. And you can also do like tilt ups and tilt downs utilizing just the gimbal system. You don't have to use like the joey stick or whatever. You can just use your body movement and it'll go with it. Now, the third one is just doing still stationary movement. Now, like a pan or a tilt, having just a stationary shot, a static shot, is really useful. And I was just in New York and I wanted to get just some still shots of the city. So what I did is I just held my body nice and still and I just got the shot that I wanted. And think about it this way, a gimbal is not just a shot to get excessive movement with. You can get very still and very beautiful still shots with it. And that's why it's one of my favorite pieces of gear on my entire toolkit, because I can do anything from like extremely still shots to extremely fast movements that are completely stable the entire time. The fourth one that I do all the time is a crane shot. So this one's actually one of my favorites. It's basically, I'll kind of prop my body down in a squatted position and then I'll lift it right up. It's totally like I'm doing like a yoga exercise, and it's so funny. Every time I shoot something, people are always looking at me like, what is that guy doing? He's just... And it's a technique that I do all the time, and it gets a really nice crane up shot. And if you're doing something like maybe a drone, some drone footage, it can go pretty well because you have like the launch off, the nice cinematic launch off, and then you can do like a nice high angle. So that's how those can cut together really well. And my fifth one and my most used shot that I use on my gimbal basically every single time I shoot on it is a nice slow push over, almost like a slider or dolly movement. And basically I'm just utilizing like a nice hip movement. And the nice thing about this is I just zoom my lens right in. I'll go on like a 24 to 105, zoom right into like a 70 or even 105, and then just do a nice swivel or pivot around a character to get this nice slider movement. This is something you get on basically any focal length. You can do it on any frame rate. What I like to do is 60 frames and do a nice spin or swivel, and you get like this nice crispy slider shot, and it turns out really great. And there's lots of things you can do with this. You can just do like nice slow movements onto a subject. You can do something like a big movement on something. But the number one thing to keep in mind is just because it's a tool that you can do crazy fast whip pans around and do a lot of things with, doesn't mean that's what you should do with it. Make sure it caters to the story you're trying to tell, and make sure you don't overuse it just because it's a tool that can do that. Remember that this has capability of getting all those different kinds of shots and doesn't have to primarily just be used to its max every single time. Like any other piece of gear, there is a time and place for it, but if you can figure out all the places that it's good for, it becomes a very valuable tool. And one of the things that I want to talk about just before I end this episode is where and when to put that into your edit, because obviously, like all pieces of gear, it can be overused. Even if it does have all these multi-functions, why doesn't every single person use this for every single one of their shots? Well, the biggest thing to keep in mind is still stable shots look really great besides something that's kind of kinetic and fast. So what I like to do is I like to do some like handheld shots and then cut it with the nice smooth shots. And even what I'll do is I'll speed up my gimbal movement just to give it like almost like a gritty handheld vibe, because then you have a nice contrast between the two shots. You have something that's fast and kinetic, and then something smooth and almost organic and relaxed. And to me, that's kind of what some of my favorite tricks that I like to utilize the gimbal with, like handheld, and they're like two buds like getting together. You got like the nice calm hippy dippy and like the crazy partier, and they get together and they make magic. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this tutorial and want to take a look at more, give PremiumBeat a subscribe. There's an awesome channel, really great content on there. I've learned so much from the stuff on there. You guys can check it out as well. If you like this stuff even more, smash that like button, write me a comment if you have any questions regarding this tutorial or want to hear some more. Give PremiumBeat a message, and love to hear from you guys. Okay, I gotta get back to editing this project that you saw all the footage for. It's not done yet, but I thought I would talk about it. And yeah, keep making some great stuff. Hopefully it helped you out, and I will see you guys in another video. Bye.